We're joined today by Thomas Ventura of Gensler. And Thomas, can you just tell us about yourself? Give us a little bit of what you're doing now at Gensler, and maybe if you want, I would love to hear a
Sure.
little bit of your background on how you got to where you are.
Yeah, sure. So I've been with Gensler now, it'll be almost 10 years. It's almost a decade, which seems kind of crazy. About 30 years in the industry. I started up in Oregon, at University of Oregon, and then was up there for about 14 years in Portland, and then made my way back down to Southern California by way of Northern California. So worked for a couple different firms here and there, but my focus primarily on mixed use, multifamily, and then eventually into hospitality, which is kind of my primary focus here at Gensler now. Do a lot of hospitality and mixed use planning, a lot of big projects, and I'm fortunate to be in the Newport Beach office, which has 4 studios, about 100 people total, but all the studios are kind of flex studios. So it's a wide range of projects from retail to hospitality and mixed use to office. So you get a little bit of everything, which is kind of fun, keeps it interesting.
And Gensler is a small firm, right? When it comes to firms overall, give us an idea of what Gensler looks like today.
Yeah, right now I think I don't know if we've actually hit 7,000. We're close to 7,000 employees.
Wow.
It's a massive firm. We've got, I believe, over 50 offices now, maybe 51. The newest, I think, we just opened in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Gensler's kind of comprised of different regions, and then within each region there's a hub office and then multiple offices. So I'm based in the Southwest region. The hub's LA, but we've got LA, Newport, San Diego, Vegas, Denver, and Phoenix in our region. Okay. So, and that's probably about 1,000 in the region.
I just saw a news article recently about the LA office, and they're talking about redesign of that office. And I'm sure that's just a constant thing that's going on at Gensler offices around the world.
Yes.
It's like, and you're not only adding offices, but you've got to be constantly updating what the stock that you have as well. It's just got to be a big ordeal.
LA's got a great location right on Figueroa downtown, and they've got kind of the 3-story, we call it the jewel box, and then they've got a connection back to the tower. But that was done, probably almost 10 years ago by now. So it's kind of the new refresh. We just went through a refresh here in the Newport Beach office as well. Just kind of updating technology, making sure we're up to speed, making sure conference rooms are dialed in, making sure there's no coffee stains on the carpets, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Well, our main topic today is sustainability. And I know that sustainability has always been a big issue in the building industry. Maybe you could lay out just kind of the landscape of what we're dealing with 2030 and commitments and what firms are doing to address this from an architectural perspective.
Yeah, I mean, Gensler, their mantras, basically change the world through the power of design, right? And so they recognize, especially a firm as large as they are, the global platform they have to really make an impact, and specifically with climate change. And the firm has committed to what's called the GC3, so the Global Cities Challenge. But basically by 2030, all of our projects are to be completely carbon neutral. Is kind of the charge. Is it possible? We're working towards that. It's a huge Herculean effort to do that, especially when you're looking at massive projects all the way down to the small tenant improvement. I mean, the range of projects is huge. So how do you do that across all that? And so we're starting to implement some new practices with that. Obviously, we've got a lot of the push from the company to really have sustainability and resilience at the forefront of what we do, and embedded in all projects from the very beginning. So it's not just a greenwashing. And so they're starting right now with what we're calling the GPS. So it's the basically global product standards or specifications. So it's adapting all of our specifications to basically use the most sustainable and sort of game-changing materials within the projects in order to reduce a lot of the embodied carbon in the projects.
Let me ask. So I think we all know that, one of the big challenges with going carbon neutral and implementing the 2030 challenge across the board, both in the profession and in the offices themselves, is really the knowledge of the staff, right? Because in a way, you can only go so far with the kind of embedded knowledge. How are you guys ensuring that your staff is actually trained up on what it actually means to go carbon neutral and support that challenge as you move forward?
There's a huge effort by the firm to make sure everyone has a level of education on that. And I'm by no means an expert, but one of the ways is really just bringing awareness to it. And so that there's a constant effort to make wise material choices, make good design decisions based on the orientation of a building, the type of fenestration on whatever, what elevation you have. But we have what we call design synergies. And so there's like a design experience, which is kind of more focused on the actual built environment, design purpose, which is kind of the why behind a project. But we also have design resilience, where we have sustainability experts within the office that will basically be embedded in each of the project teams. And as well as, like a typical QC form, QA QC, when we go through our project checks, you typically have like a project manager, a project architect signing off on that. We also have a process where we have review from the design directors, as well as the resilience director or resilience member, basically making sure that the project is kind of hitting all the parameters that we want to do as a company. But there's constant seminars, lunch and learns, opportunities for education throughout the firm. In terms of bringing best sustainable practices together, we consistently try to gather as much metrics as we can from all of our projects and working with the engineers to make sure that we're specifying systems from an HVAC standpoint, from a lighting standpoint, to have the least impact in terms of energy usage that we can. And we continue to collect those as data points. And with the broad range of projects we have, we can actually start to really see where the impact is happening across the portfolio of work.
One of the things that when I was working in a large firm was that I thought was really an interesting shift culturally that I saw happening was that young graduates, emerging professionals just had this level of citizenship when it came to sustainability and environmentalism that we hadn't seen in previous generations. It was an ethos that they brought to the firm, and where you might have older generations, and obviously totally generalizing here at this point, but it was like an option on projects, whereas with the younger generation, it was embodied in every single project. It was table stakes. Like, this is the direction we have to go. This is our world that we're going to be living in. It's our kids and our grandchildren's world that they're going to be living in, and really took it a lot more personally. I'm just wondering, from your perspective, are you seeing something like that as well, or have you seen that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a much more heightened sense of awareness from all of the younger staff coming in. And certainly that's been a focus of a lot of the education that's happening through the universities. But it's definitely, even here, just been a complete culture shift to really make that a key focus on everything that we do. Like I said, from the very beginning, kind of the base ideas of the project, there have to be some measure of a sustainable goal that's the ethos of each project and kind of the why of what we're doing. And most of the time, it resonates with the clients as well, and we try to bring them along as partners. Obviously, the projects have to serve the client, but we want to be partners with the clients, and we want to have clients that align with our goals as well as us aligning with their goals as well. Right. So we're trying to be a little selective with the clients as well as the employees to focus that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a I don't know. Sometimes maybe some architects might think that's kind of a privileged position to be in, but it's also, I know what you're saying. It's like it has to be mutually beneficial. It's not completely one-sided. Yeah. Let's talk about some of the stats that kind of drive this.
Yeah, two that are like pretty important is if you look at sort of the embodied carbon of a project, like 18% of carbon emissions is based on making a building, building a building. But if you look at the operational use of a building, about 40% of the carbon is from operation of the building. So if we can affect how buildings perform, it can drastically have a reduction in terms of the overall carbon emissions for our projects, and ultimately just have a huge impact with the amount of work that we do as a firm. So we recognize that as a responsibility we have as a firm.
And that energy consumption really is like around the clock, right? I think that's one of the big things that we have to recognize. I remember even during the pandemic, when nobody was in the office, that building was still the lights were still turning on every day. The HVAC was still running every day. It runs at night so that the build, during the summer, it's cool when you walk
Sure.
in the doors in the morning. Again, even if nobody's showing up. And so these are the kinds of things that I think need to be top of mind for everybody who's practicing today, which if there's anything we can do to lower those numbers,
Yep.
it helps in really big ways because it really does add up.
Huge. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And that typically is kind of the kind of educational factor or educational point, talking point, as we call it, when we're talking with clients, when they're asking us kind of like the why. Why is our first cost so high? Why are we spending this much for this? And having that conversation with them about the return on their investment, how quickly spending something that is more energy efficient in the long term, one, help reduce that 40% of the operation budget, but also start to see a return on their investment a lot quicker than if they just went with any manufacturer off the road. That's just your typical kind of like bargain basement, affordable, piece.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes with one, just understanding kind of what the long-term goals of your client are, right?
Yeah.
Is it a long-term hold? Are they buying this? Are they developing a project for a quick sale? And if that's the case, you still have to look at the performance metrics to actually make that a more valuable asset, right? But really, it's about working and partnering with good consultants, good engineers, to kind of have a full strategy for each project that makes a lot more sense than your sort of traditional building methods.
Yeah.
You talked about having buildings running 24/7. There's ways obviously to augment that. We all know about motion sensors, turning the lights off when no one's in the room. But also in terms of HVAC, having night purges, you start to look at solars and battery systems and looking at all the systems, how they can kind of offset each other so that everything's operating as optimally as possible. But also, those are all active systems. How do you design it for passive systems, passive ventilation, passive cooling, not gaining the heat from solar? There's a lot you can do in terms of the base level of design that is kind of old school design, if you will.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's trying to really pay attention to how the building's put together, so you're not so reliant on the actual active systems.
Yeah, start
is,
with passive design and then
Yeah.
augment with active.
Exactly.
Yeah. after the
Exactly.
fact. Yeah.
Constant conversation that we have with our own staff, but we also have that same conversation with our clients too, so that they understand what the importance of the design decisions that we make are.
One of the myths I think that some have heard over the years is that, and we talked a little bit about energy consumption for indoor spaces, but that there's some people see outdoor spaces, they see heaters running, they see lights on, they see all kinds of things, air movement, you got to keep fans blowing and things like that. There's this idea that outdoor spaces also consume a lot of energy, and I'm sure in some cases that's true, but generally when we look at indoor versus outdoor, have you seen any shifts more towards outdoor because of the need for natural ventilation? I mean, obviously we're still talking about passive design a lot of times to control sun and shade and wind and things like that. But what do you got from that side of it?
Absolutely. I think in all of our projects across the board, all different practice areas, whether it's hospitality, office, retail, especially like dining, there is always a need for good outdoor space and a demand for it now. And especially like in light of with COVID, it's like everybody's looking for the outdoor option, right? Because we all moved to outdoors. We're having lunch in the parking lot, but no one wants to go back to going back inside because it was such a great space being outside and having. And here being in Southern California too, we have the benefit of great weather, so that helps. And with the expectation of having good outdoor space, there's also people are a little more accommodating in terms of temperature swings and being not really uncomfortable, but their range of comfort widens when you're outside because the expectation that's not 72.6 inside, right?
Right.
It's gonna vary. You're gonna be in the sun. It's gonna be a little hotter. You're gonna be a little more exposed. You may have some wind, and it's obviously you do things to control that and still make that a comfortable environment. But I think there's a little more tolerance for some variety, and that's what people are searching for.
Talk a little bit more about that. Like, what are some of the design strategies for outdoor spaces? Because there's natural light, right? But you don't want 100% direct sunlight, right? You want to be able to control that. there's a need for temperature control. There's a need for wind control, ventilation, things like that when it comes to, you know, like people do like fresh air too. So, but again, there's a range that people are comfortable with, right? And the other thing I want to tag onto that before you take it and run is, you're seeing a lot of this in California, Southern California, as far because the temperate climate. But we're talking to other people in this series that are saying that across the country, people are asking for these types of spaces.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
There's obviously seasonal differences, temperature differences, but the demand is still very high across the board. So taking all that into account, I mean, what are you seeing?
You're absolutely right. I mean, like I said, we do projects all over the country and all over the world, and we're absolutely seeing that in all climates, all project types. There is a need and appetite and a demand for good outdoor space. And you talked about a little bit the design of that. I mean, the key is really, you start kind of with the light and the shadow, right? It's got to be well lit, but you don't want the glare. So this dappled light idea is great. You have some access to shade, but still some access to direct light should you want that. You know, ventilation's huge. Air movement's a big deal, but not too much. It's just enough that you have you know, a comfort level there. And then with that, you moderate the temperature. You know, whether it's you've got a great breeze coming off, you know, a bluff, or you know, or if you're in an urban environment, you know, how do you screen those elements and actually provide a buffer from what's happening on the outside? So you kind of create a little microclimate within what you're designing is kind of key. So it's really understanding the context that you're designing for.
Curious about, you know, you had mentioned that you guys just opened up a Riyadh office, and just so happens that is a project that I'm working on right now, is a brand new university in Riyadh. And one of the things that, you know, we're doing is very much to the point that you were just making, is a lot of the exterior spaces are designed to be essentially, let's not say 24 hours a day, you know, 7 days a week kind of spaces, but pretty much where you're able to be outside comfortably during the day in some of the more scorching heat, and be able to actually spend that time. Because one of the things that in the now 3.5 years of working on this project and visiting overseas quite often, is that we'll have a lot of the exterior spaces really come to life once the sun goes down. Absolutely. And then it's really kind of employing, okay, now we know that the desert doesn't really hold heat, so how do we make these spaces comfortable as well as just the whole gamut? I mean, are you seeing spaces like that throughout a lot of the projects that you're doing, where, you know, you're really trying to extend them, not just during, like, you know, the daytime operations, but, you know, really like all hours of the day and night?
Absolutely. I mean, and especially when you look at Middle Eastern or even European countries, you know, their schedule's a lot different than in the States.
Very much so.
Dinner times, an early dinner sometimes is 10 o'clock at night, right?
Yeah.
And especially like in the Middle East, like I travel quite a bit in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and you'd see families out there at 11 o'clock, midnight, kicking a soccer ball around where they're having a barbecue until 2 a.m. That's just the normal course of a day. You know, obviously their day starts a little later. But yeah, I think it's also understanding the culture you're designing in. And designing for. That's a key thing. But absolutely, the need to try to activate at all hours of the day is key. And obviously, like, we're looking at a project now here, even locally in Irvine, where, you know, it's an old traditional office park, tilt-up office building, 2-story, but they're looking for ways. How do you activate this campus? How do you know, it's all about how to get people back to the office because everyone's been home, you know, away. But it's really about creating a vibrant, active space that's not just about the office. It's a destination that it's close to rooftop where people live. It's you know, there's great food and beverage. There's great amenities on site. There's a reason to be there after the 8 to 5. And you're not there for the office. And so it's trying to find ways to use those in between spaces within these campus settings that you know, really make the space come alive. And a lot of it has to do with just making a mixed use. You know, so having a lot more use than just office. Right?
It seems like there's a lot of expectation from users now around the types of mix of spaces that they want to see in places.
Absolutely.
And corporate America, for this example, is having to react to that, to, like you said, like to entice people back to the office. And you're talking about a new office park, but I could also assume with existing office parks that like they've got to find ways to do that. Can you just talk about those like changing expectations in the marketplace when it comes to types of spaces that people want?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the big things we're looking at, certainly here in Orange County, but nationally as well. There's a huge depression in the office market, right? Because offices that were totally full now are on a hybrid schedule, so you don't need as much work area or floor area, or they're compressing, or they even closed certain wings. People just aren't coming back. And the market that's out there is highly competitive. And so you've got a huge vacancy of the lease rates for offices. So we're seeing a lot of sort of office to resi type of conversions that are being looked at, or office to hospitality, or hospitality to resi. I mean, there's a lot of crossover that's happening. And so in a lot of these office parks where there is a high vacancy and they are trying to entice people, a lot of times it's change of use that makes a huge difference. And it's not just the whole thing, it's bits and pieces of that. So you have a range and a variety of uses. And that outdoor space is kind of what stitches and knits those all together.
It does seem like there's a lot of challenges in incorporating outdoor spaces just because of kind of baggage isn't the right word, but maybe you understand what I mean. It's like this is how we've always done it, right? And so this is a new component that we're adding in, and so a lot of times the outdoor spaces have been thought of as an afterthought, or just that those aren't something that are prioritized in the types of spaces that we need in our new building. But I think that's shifted. Right. Is that the case?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because I think, and again, I'll just look at the office market. If there's an expectation for a highly amenitized outdoor space, and so the office isn't just the office anymore. You've got outdoor meeting rooms, you've got outdoor gathering spaces, you've got access to food and beverage, company events. I mean, there's a lot of different things that is an expectation for a lot of different users. Same thing for your resi or your hospitality. There's a certain expectation of having access and an amenity outside.
How much of that is driven by like mental health awareness, do you think? I mean, I'm just wondering.
Because some is.
And the reason I ask is because I know personally, like I don't want to be, I work out of my house. Right? I don't want to be in my house all the time. And we've seen tech companies for many years try to build it all into the one place. They've got the breakfast bar and they've got the cafe, and they don't want people to leave, right? And I think working in architecture, we know what a long work day could possibly look like, right? But we also understand the need to get out. And like if you're in an urban area, when I was working in LA, it was like, we go out and we walk and we go to lunch and you're on foot and you go somewhere to have that, and then you go back to the office, and that does give you a chance to kind of do a mini reset during the middle of the day.
Totally.
Is that a big driver, do you think? That just people's awareness of their own kind of...
I think it is both a conscious decision, but also subconscious need that they want to be outside. It's why you get cabin fever, right? It's like you're cooped up, you need to get out, and it's like you don't know why, but it's like we need to have fresh air. We need vitamin D. We need to get out and out of just four walls. So I think it's that subconscious drive, but I think there is more awareness, and I think that's starting to be programmed into a lot more spaces intentionally. And those spaces are now able to kind of be monetized as well, which means that they're willing to put the investment in to do it right.
Right. So how does these exterior spaces contribute or support the kind of sustainable aspect of your project designs?
I think it offers a variety of spaces. It allows your large space inside to be extended so you have this great sort of indoor outdoor, again, especially in this kind of market. But it also helps reduce like the load on the building in terms of how much energy is being used in the building. If you can bring in natural daylight, you can obviously reduce the amount of light levels that are needed. If you can bring in natural ventilation, it obviously augments what's necessary for the HVAC system. And again, once you start to now incorporate outdoor space with the indoor space, it's one sort of seamless piece. Again, it gets back to that sort of expectation of comfort that people have.
Right.
There's more of a tolerance now for people inside the building as well as what's happening outside the building.
It also poses challenges security-wise, though, right? Because you're potentially
Yeah.
creating more connections indoor, outdoor. You've got
That's-
stuff
yeah.
that's outside that you got to lock down
Exactly.
or put, So what about
Sure.
that side of it?
That's a huge part of it. And I think that's part of the reluctance, probably, when you kind of think of the old way of thinking of it, right? It was always like, yeah, let's do a nice corporate campus, but it's locked down. You've got to have security badges to get in, and this is my space. No one else can join it, right? But now I think there's definitely more of this push for a communal space where it's the whole community that's part of this, and that's also part of the reason for having that 24/7 is that there's always eyes, right? There's always things that are happening. There's always things that are active and engaged. So security is part of that, but when you have a lot of people and a lot of activity that's happening, less opportunity. I mean, there's always opportunity for bad stuff to happen, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean? There's always people that are present that may be more of a deterrent than not.
Yeah, more
If you're like in an empty space trying to sneak into
exactly.
someplace.
More eyes outside means kind of
Right.
more eyes on points of
Right.
entry and things like that.
You mentioned earlier about kind of picking the right products, right? You talked about, I don't know if Gensler has like a database where it's like people are applying to be part of it, or how you're actually figuring out, because there's just so many products out there. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. But Cormac and I have both
Sure.
worked in the K-12 and university schools. And one of the things that we've talked about many times on this podcast is how design decisions are driven by maintenance a lot of times because of,
Yeah.
and so that's another way to interpret sustainability, right? Is
Schools-
how long are things going to last? How long are they going to serve the client?
Yeah.
Because this is expensive stuff, right? So,
Oh, yeah.
and so getting back to the product part of the question, right? Is that, I kind of assume that's also part of it. It's just,
That's a huge part of sustainability, right? It's not about getting the cheapest thing out there. It's about getting things that are going to last. And when you start thinking about design, and like schools obviously are like one of the heaviest users of any
Yeah.
material, any product. You'll
Yeah.
wear it out the quickest. Probably second to that's hospitality. And so if you think about a hotel lobby and a chair, what does that chair have to upholster? What does that have to be
Right.
in order to withstand as much use as it's going to get, but also that it's not so trendy that it's going to be out of date, out of design in a couple of years. So you want to pick timeless things that are going to last, that also have durability, as well as, from an aesthetic standpoint, have a level of durability as well. But in terms of what we're doing, you mentioned the specifications. So again, we've got the new GPS that we just kicked off in January, the global product standards. And those are right now, it's kind of in its infancy, so it's a small list of items, but it's about 12, 14 of sort of the most frequently used materials in buildings that could have sort of the biggest impact. You look at your carpet tiles, your ceiling tiles, your LVT, those type of products that are sort of mass surfaces, but that have huge impacts. It's durability. They need to have a certain level of durability, so they're not being changed out every couple of years. It has a 5 to 10 year life cycle to that, or even longer. As well as just the style of it. It's got to be appropriate, so it has a timeless element to that. But also, each product that we're requiring to have their own EPD, so which is kind of equate that as like the ingredients list when you buy a box of food, right? It has everything on there. Well, products will have an EPD, which basically is a declaration of how the product was made, what's in the product, where is it manufactured, and that gives a specific rating based on those metrics. And so that goes into our database, which then we can say, okay, this is acceptable within the GPS standards, or it's not acceptable, or it's a market differentiator where it actually is something we really want to push to use because it has that level of impact. And so that's what we're trying to do, as well as to just educate the staff here as well, to understand what products have sort of the biggest level of impact, and really trying to push to use those type of products. And to your point, vendors, we're trying to work with vendors to make sure they have the EPDs for their product, but also that they're trying to push to have a better, more sustainable product.
Cormac mentioned earlier first costs, right? And we're talking about longer lasting building materials that may not be the cheapest. And so
Right.
I'm wondering, as an architect too, like, had so many conversations with clients where there are options of things that they can choose. And oftentimes, especially in public work, they want to go with the cheaper option because of that first cost. But there are trade-offs. How do you have those conversations with clients? Because I think there's going to be a lot of architects who are listening to this show, and they're all going to be nodding along. Like, this totally makes sense from our standpoint. And they're the ones, the clients, who have to spend the money, and you have to have that conversation about long-term cost versus first cost.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, what are some strategies that you employ during those conversations to kind of help paint that picture so they can make the right decision?
It starts at the beginning. It's getting them to buy into what the project goals are from the very beginning, right? And so if you can do that, and from a sustainability or resilience standpoint, you're 9/10 of the way there, because now you've got a partner in that. If it's a hard sell at the very end, say, oh, by the way, we want to use these products because because they're gonna make the building better, but I'm paying 20% more. Why am I going to do that? They have to understand why and have a desire to have a building that wants to perform at a higher level from the beginning. So that's kind of the starting point, and it's just an education process through the whole project. But I think architecture is as much of a business as it is a design profession, and you have to understand where their business is and understand a little bit of the economics about that, so that you can be able to paint the case that, okay, if we're using this type of a product that's going to last X amount of years, operationally it's going to help you in the long run. Same thing when you're picking HVAC systems or lighting systems. You're looking at the overall performance of the building. The same approach is with materials. Things that are going to be part of the building for a longer period of time. You're not going to have renovations for a longer period of time. The building has a longer lifespan, and lower maintenance is kind of the key. So if you can start to help paint the picture for them, for what's the value for a better quality product and a better quality design, then that's kind of the starting point there.
I think it's always kind of driving home that 40%, as part of like the overall operation. And then how does that impact their operations, the finances to just maintain the building, to potentially have to replace a piece of equipment or something that maybe is a little bit more expensive, has a different type of maintenance regime than other things. And it's just that we always, talk about, and I know everybody, all architects try to be transparent about the materials that you use throughout from day one. You said it perfectly, setting a goal on day one and really kind of talking about that, and then reinforcing it throughout all of the different stages about how you're supporting that initial goal. And then if it comes up to like, oh, well, we've decided that we had to go this route rather than this route, but at least telling them how it's supporting the goal.
I think there's another part of it too, that it can be a little more self-serving, but it's knowing your client.
Yes. Yeah.
Knowing what their goals are. But if there's a way that their efforts are recognized and set them apart as a differentiator as well, that's something that could be part of their branding effort, part of their marketing effort. It can be something that provides them some tax benefits or even development benefits. So it's trying to look at all the different avenues that, again, you can help the client make that decision and help them make the right decision.
One of the things that both of you guys were talking about a little bit earlier is, about like how the younger architects, emerging professionals are coming in with this kind of like goal of sustainability as something that they learned in school. And one of the things that we've noticed, because we do a lot of, we do all higher education work. And, one of the things that we try to do with a client is really talk to them about, the sustainability goals and how they can reinforce it. But they do absolutely use that as some form of marketing one way, either whether it's, pulling in donors or, pulling in students to like attract the best, the best students, the best donors, the best principal investigators, all of these things that are able to like say, okay, I'm working for a company that is on the forefront of sustainability and really takes the future of the environment seriously.
It's one of the things I love about working with Gensler is that, again, because as large as they are, it affords you a lot of resources and a lot of tools to do what we do. And there is a very strong push for research and for kind of pushing the boundary in design, but just in looking at new ways of doing things, trying to be as innovative as possible, whether it's partnering with another firm, whether it's doing internal research. But every year we have basically a research grant that we put out, and it allows younger staff as well as older staff to want to partner to kind of come up with just new and innovative ideas, and the firm really celebrates that, and it's kind of part of the culture here, which I really love, and I think is refreshing to a lot of younger employees coming right out of school, because it kind of still has this some level of sort of that academic pursuit, right?
Yeah.
And striving for new things and study.
And some of that research gets published externally, right? Like that,
Yes,
it's not
yeah.
just an internal thing. I know I've
Correct.
consumed those research reports too. You'll do a workplace study.
Yeah.
And so you maybe talk a little bit more about that, because I think it's a great plug right now.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of that. So each of the practice areas that we have, we kind of look at, design, we call it design forecast. And so there's a design forecast for, so what are the new trends coming out? What are the kind of the hot topics or key topics that are going to be driving design for us as a firm, but also just in the industry at large? There's also our research catalog that's published every year as well, that kind of has a result of a lot of those research grants that are a lot more in depth, a lot more in the weeds. But it allows us to basically just continue to catalog some great in-depth knowledge that kind of help us be a market leader in a lot of the different practice areas.
The thing that I love about that is one of the things Evan and I talk about a lot on the podcast is sometimes the lack of research and development from the AE community, more the architectural community. And this is somewhat self-serving, because it's like, okay, how do we push our design? But we push our design in high performance, in sustainability and things like that. But then in turn, what it does is it basically shows you can do an all curtain wall with some kind of scrim over it and all that other stuff. But how does that benefit the overall support of sustainability, the overall support of the resilience that you were talking about? And these are the things that I'm kind of glad that firms are taking a leadership role in the research and development side of the future of the practice.
Yeah, agreed. I'm very fortunate and blessed to be part of it. So I enjoy working here. It's great.
One of the things that I want to touch on is just, we touched on it earlier, which was kind of just the kind of afterthought that outdoor space with the combination, when you're looking at a new campus, like you brought up earlier, and how those spaces are outfitted versus what people are kind of expecting nowadays. And then maybe you can talk a little bit about what types of things you're doing in those spaces with building products, things that you're seeing in that area to make those places, to ensure that they actually get used. I think that's one of the things that a lot of clients have a concern over, is that they're going to spend money on a space. They're not going to put enough into it to truly make it a destination of a feel for someone to actually use it. And then it's a complete waste of money. But I know that there's strategies that are employed to ensure usefulness of those. So I'd love to hear what you're doing there.
I think it starts with making a space you want to be in. And so sometimes it starts with, a great view. Sometimes it starts with a destination that you've kind of created that's kind of removed from everything. Like if you're, again, like in your urban environment, you want this little oasis. So you're looking for things that are, one, it's a discovery, right? And it's like, oh, wow, this is amazing. You want to spend it. But then once you're there, it's got to be a comfortable space. And it's got to engage all your senses, right? It's got to be a pleasant place to be in, pleasant to look at. We look at outdoor spaces with the ability of kind of integrating with the landscape in terms of the smell and the olfactory senses, and being able to have this sort of great experience. Water, the sound of water, or wind coming through a certain type of tree. Like there's all those sort of senses that you really have to start to curate that experience. And so as long as you're really paying attention to all of those, that's kind of a recipe for success. But again, it's at the end of it, it's got to be a place you want to be. It's also knowing the type of space. Is it meant to be a contemplative space for a singular, or is it meant to be a loud space with a lot of people? And so it's kind of tuning it for what you're trying to create.
I like how you started that off, because I immediately thought of spaces that I've been to where it's like Seattle or San Francisco, or it could be my local town, where it's like you feel like you found something special, and that was the initial draw. But then you have to really follow that up with the things that will keep you there and keep it useful for you. And then there's also the kind of unseen stuff, like, is there background music? Are there things that are, is there Wi-Fi, right? Connectivity. Are there comfortable options to sit depending on what I want to do?
You only notice it when it's not there.
Right.
True.
Right.
The absence of. Yeah.
Right. So I think there's an expectation for all of those things.
Yeah.
There's an expectation. I can get onto a Wi-Fi signal. There's an expectation, or if it's specifically to disengage, there's an expectation there isn't one, right? You don't have phone reception.
Right.
So
Yeah.
It's understanding what you're
goals.
designing that space for. Right.
Yeah. And then environmental constraints, bringing it back to kind of across the nation, across the world, and really understanding the microclimate of the area, really understanding the useful hours and how you can
Sure.
really make it work for as much time as possible.
Yeah, I mean, thermal comfort is probably key to that. Whether it's if you're in a hot environment, providing shade, providing air movement so that you can bring the temperatures down, the ambient temperature down, or maybe introduce some cooling through water. Or if it's getting, nighttime hours, it's getting cold. How do you have access to natural light, or do you augment that with, different heating elements, whether it's fire or actual, heater element of some sort? There's a lot of different ways to obviously we can do that, but I think ultimately it wants to be an integrated solution to make it more impactful.
And just bringing that back to sustainability, like even thinking about thermal mass, right?
Oh, totally.
Like going back to those passive design principles for how can we create a heat sink so that this will be a more comfortable space through more hours of the night, for example.
Right. Or talk about like a Trome wall, right? Like during the day, you think about this big, massive piece that's collecting sun at one point, but it's providing shade in the hot hours of the day and the night hours. It's hopefully radiating that heat back if it's designed properly.
Right.
Not enough people talk about the Trom wall.
Not enough.
Yeah, I'm an Oregon duck. I graduated up in Eugene, so we talked a lot about Trome walls up there.
I'm an Auburn Tiger, and we talk about Trom walls too.
Awesome. Maybe we'll just finish up with the future of this kind of sustainability aspect and where you see things going with indoor-outdoor expectations of what people are looking for with offices and shopping. Like what I think we're really seeing is a convergence of a lot of different types of space design and incorporating a lot of multiple use zones into a lot of these where things used to be really specific use cases. But I'm really curious because Gensler touches so many projects in so many markets. If you were really seeing trends,
I think you said it. I think we're looking at very flexible spaces, right? And there aren't many one-liners anymore. Things have to be multiple uses, very able to adapt and converge, and that being from a use standpoint as well as from a thermal standpoint, from inside outside, being able to expand a room, contract a room, or a space. I think there's a lot of need to do that just because the buildings are becoming so expensive to build and to operate. And the more bang you can get for the buck, I think the better, the more value you bring to the client, to the space. And so I think there's definitely a need for fully considering all aspects of a design. Again, it's not the one-liner space anymore.
and it's not just trying to be clever for being clever's sake, right? It really is about doubling the value of these things, or even more, because that's when owners, because they're spending more money on this than anything they've ever spent any money on, right? And so it's like when you can really make things double the value because of the flexibility, or because of the adaptability, or because of, this can be used for lots of different types of things. I think those are really the things that they notice and are willing to spend a little bit more on than they would on the baseline, but it's kind of has to be like a double value, a twofer, right?
But it allows you to have operations beyond just the normal window that was typically there. Right? We talked about having these campuses that are open, 24/7. Well, that same space can't function 24/7 the same way.
Right.
If it's truly engaged in the environment and part of the place that it's designed for, right? It has to breathe, it has to move, it has to adapt, just like we do. And so it's thinking of the building as an organism, if you will, and having the ability of opening, contracting, opening, closing, that allows it to engage and adapt as the environment changes and adapts.
That's like a perfect place to wrap it up. I think that felt really good. So Thomas, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us and share some amazing insight into the amount of work that you guys are doing. So again, thanks for hanging out with us today.
Absolutely. Pleasure.